Hello and good evening. I'm Melisa Idris. Welcome to Consider This. This is the show where we want you to consider and then reconsider what you know of the news of the day. The 13th Malaysian Plan which is the government's blueprint for the national development over the next 5 years. It was unveiled last week, and among its many ambitions are efforts to strengthen the education system and develop a future-ready workforce. But do the policies go far enough to ensure Malaysia's human capital is fit for 2030 and beyond? Well, joining me on the show to discuss this further is Datuk Satinah Syed Saleh, who is advisor to the Malaysian Association for Education. She's also an adjunct professor at Universiti of Cyberjaya's Faculty of Psychology and Social Sciences. Datuk Satinah, thank you so much for being on the show. It's good to have you back on the show with us today. I'm curious to know what some of your initial impressions were of the 13th Malaysia Plan. I mean, does it for you demonstrate a clear vision of what Malaysia's education system should be in the next 5 years?
Thank you, Melisa, for having me today. And I'm quite pleased to be around as well. Since the last time we chatted about education as well. Well, coming back to your questions, actually, my first impression, I thought there were many good things. It is a lot of effort put in actually drafting the plan, you know. However, education is something that is something that you need to look at it in a slightly broader scheme, you know. I look at it as something very positive, especially when we are having a 71.6 billion in the education sector. That is a huge amount of money, you know, and it is like an affirmation that human capital remains the priority of our country, for that matter. The allocation also reflects on the importance of nurturing talents and in this rapidly evolving digital world, I suppose. Right. And whatever it is, I think we'll go through later on. It is a very bold future-oriented vision for Malaysia, for education system. It positions actually the education as a driver of national competitiveness and social progress. The clear strengths in the plan, but however, there are a few other things that I would like to mention later on that I feel could have been, not to say improved, must be emphasized, you know, in terms of implementation, so that we'll have the right ingredients. Right. For the transformation.
Can I ask you what you liked about it? So you called it a bold, some of the initiatives were bold in the education sector. Can I ask you which parts or which stood out to you as positives from the 13th Malaysia Plan?
Firstly, actually, it emphasized for future-ready skills. We talk about STEM, we talk about digital literacy, AI, and TVET. TVET is still there, even though it has been there for a long time, you know, but it is mentioned again. To prepare our youth for the challenges of IR 4.0 and also the global disruption. I'm concerned about the global disruption because it is something that we cannot predict totally. And secondly, it upholds the values of inclusion and equity, because we talk about it with targeted intervention for vulnerable groups like what they call this, or asli, rural communities, as well as disabilities, B40, and those with the neurodivergent children. Those are actually what I like very much. And lastly, actually, it also highlights the critical importance of teacher quality, which is the utmost important in any learning, any studying, whatever effort that we do. Teacher is the main concern. It was proven, Melisa, when we did the education blueprint, we went into looking into the current system at that time, you know, and the school leadership as well. Yeah.
Okay. So some positives there. Can I delve deeper into some of the things you mentioned? So when you talked about, you know, the 13th Malaysia Plan highlighting AI, digital literacy, STEM, TVET, multilingualism as well, I think very forward-looking in terms of focusing on that. But when we think about these ambitions, are they grounded in current capabilities? I mean, Malaysia has long struggled with the even foundational literacy and numeracy skills. So do we risk putting the cart before the horse with these ambitions?
Definitely. I would actually, that was another question that you were asking, earlier on. We have to be very careful because we are still actually struggling with numeracy and literacy. I think it is proven. We look at the results of PISA, for example. Yeah. So whether we are grounded or not, I think there is no doubt students to sort of ingrain it into the future shape, we need to also look at what are the foundational aspect of our children, whether they are ready, whether the system is ready for them to take this, and then also at the same time the facilities that we have, because we look at if this reform, this transformation is for rural school, rural area, it is okay. But if you are looking at beyond that, the isolated areas, those in the interiors, those without the facility, even electricity for that matter, then we will have a little bit of issue with that. Yeah.
Okay. Do you think, so when you look at the plan overall, there's a lot that mentions about kind of technical fixes, very sector-specific initiatives. But if you, as you mentioned, sometimes we have to look at it from a holistic point of view or a bird's eye point of view. Do you think there's anything missing from the broader vision for Malaysia's human capital?
Yes, and I think that is a very critical question that you asked, Melisa. What is missing, like in that matter? I think what is missing. Yeah, I would say that we need to step back and look at the bigger picture, because as you said, are we fixing the system, or are we also shaping the soul of our future generation? I think that is important. So the critical aspect, I would say, while our plan covers the mechanics of skill supply, sector alignment, economic productivity, but it lacks cohesive, future-facing human capital philosophy, and which goes beyond employability. Actually, it's not about them getting a job from school to go and get a job. It's not about that. And instead, we should also focus on other aspects of it, like ethical and purpose-driven Malaysian. And I like to highlight actually the 4 critical gaps that we have. First is character, citizenship, and civic competence. I think these are the things that is very, very important when we are talking about building our nation. Human capital isn't just about producing workers; it is about nation building. And we need young Malaysians who are grounded in ethics, empathy, resilience, and civic responsibility. I don't see this being mentioned. These values are barely mentioned. I would say barely mentioned. I wouldn't say they're not mentioned at all. So where is actually the national agenda for character education, civics, participation, and unity? Those are, to me, right now, with all these challenges, is so fundamental.
Right.
That's one aspect. Yeah.
Right. So beyond the technical skills, beyond the future skills, but also the character skills and the softer skills, is that what you're highlighting?
Yes, because I think the plan focuses on the schooling to employability, to get a job, But how about learning beyond school and also beyond work? I think we need to look into lifelong learning, not just for economic survival, but for personal growth, for that matter. I don't know, Melisa. I think we all, at my age, I'm still learning so many things. And that also for active aging and social cohesion. We are talking about in our country, many of our population past certain age, which is very, very, not to say we have young people, but we need to really groom them. So we need to actually basically encourage learning at all stages of life. Those are the few things that we need to look at, I think, from early childhood to retirement.
Right. Very holistic, very bigger picture perspective. When you think about the 13th Malaysia Plan and these types of kind of blueprints, these years-long blueprints, we've seen ambitious plans before. Malaysia is not short of great ideas, but we often struggle with implementation. What do you think, Datuk Satinah, is what will it take to move from policy intent to real systemic change in education this time around?
I think, yes. Thank you Melisa, this is a very interesting topic, I would say. I have always been quite open about certain things. I think setting the context is very important. Malaysia has never lacked of ambition, as you said. From Vision 2020 to Malaysian Education Blueprint, which is already finishing, and your new one is coming up, And our policies are all often very visionary and forward-looking. I must say that because it has been proven for that matter. But let's be honest. We need to be honest. Our challenges has never been about having good ideas, good thinking or good ideas, but it is about executing. How do we execute? So the real question is, what will it take actually this time to move from policy intent to real systemic change? So I have put certain thoughts for that matter. One, as always been mentioned, political will and policy continuity. I think first and foremost, we need political will that outlives politics itself. It should not put politics first and then political will. It shouldn't be that way. And systemic change takes time. It requires leadership across governments to stay the course. This, I think, we will look into that. It's not when we have a new leaders. It's not about rebranding. It is not about restarting. Every time when there is a change in administration, consistency is a key for that matter. If we keep changing direction, when are we going to reach the destination? I think those are very important. I keep mentioning this, Melisa.
Yeah, I remember.
Because I think we owe it to our generation. We owe it to our people the sincerity of executing our job. It doesn't matter at the level higher one or the lower part.
How do we ensure that the continuity that you speak of, so that with every administration change, with every minister change, that there is no disruption to the vision for education in Malaysia?
Right. First of all, as I mentioned, I think understanding the policy itself, what has been put, the plan, it is very important. And secondly, I say this, Melisa, I think any leaders for that matter, they are politicians. I'm not talking about government officials. You can't put politics above the advantages that can benefit from what you do, we continue to do. If they are good, let us continue. If you feel there are some amendment to be done, do it by all means, but it is not about branding yourself to sit there and have your own brand for that matter. I have been in the system for a long time. I see it from outside now. This sometimes is happening. And I think that is one thing that I feel. To empower and accountability. For institution, we have to empower them, also let them have that accountability. So no policy, actually, when we talk about education, no policy can succeed if the agency responsible are actually outstretched or under resources. And then we are looking at schools, we are looking at universities, TVET, and so on. They must be given capacity, autonomy, and clarity to deliver whatever has been given, whether it is curriculum or creativity and so on. But with autonomy must also come accountability for that matter.
Right.
That is the second one. I'd like to mention the last one is leadership at every level. How do we transform our education system? In the Malaysia, the 13 Malaysia Plan reform, systemic reform cannot just happen in Putrajaya. It has to move beyond. It happens to go to the classroom, schools, district, communities, and so on. So we need visionary and courageous leadership in every level, every stage of those places for that matter. So those are things I feel, and I'm not. There are few more that I feel, but I think we don't have the time. So
it's a big topic, and unfortunately we have run out of time. So Datuk Satinah, thank you so much for being on the show with me today. That was educationist Datuk Satinah Syed Saleh, advisor to the Malaysian Association for Education. We're going to take a quick break here and consider this. We'll be back with more. Stay tuned. welcome back to Consider This. I'm Melisa Idris. Let's continue our discussion about the 13th Malaysia Plan, which was tabled in Parliament last week. We're zooming in on the policy roadmap that's been outlined specifically for education and human capital development. Joining me on the show now is Professor Moses Samuel, who's Senior Research Fellow with the School of Education at Taylor's University. He's also an Honorary Professor at Universiti Malaya's Faculty of Education. Prof. Moses, thank you so much for being on the show with me today. Was there anything in the 13th Malaysia Plan that you thought might be a game changer for education and for building Malaysia's human capital?
Well, I want to step back a little bit. And I think when we look at Malaysia plans, we must realize they are 5-year plans. And they were built on the old Soviet-style development plans. That's good in a sense because it offers a medium-term or slightly long-term perspective. What it doesn't do is it doesn't, because of the time span, it doesn't deal with mid-flight changes. You know, I'm thinking of an analogy of an aeroplane that's flying to a destination. There are mid-flight changes that you take to deal with turbulences and so on. And this is especially critical now because we are dealing with a period of uncertainty. Economic uncertainty on the one hand, and also technological change, which is happening so fast. You can't predict what's going to happen in 5 years. 2 years might be a more realistic target. And especially when technology seems to be part of the education, part of the blueprint, I think this is something that we need to take into account, especially when you're dealing with the training of teachers. So in a period of rapid change all around, I think the 5-year targets are good, but there must also be, well, planners need to take cognizance of how you can tweak and monitor what's going on. That's my take on Malaysia plans.
Right, you're right. It is kind of a long period for something as quickly evolving as the education system. Can we talk a little bit about some of the things that the plan got right in terms of its vision for the education system of Malaysia over the 5 years? Was there anything that you thought really stood out to you in saying, okay, it's good that we've got this on the table now, that we're thinking about these issues?
Well, one of the things I think that the plan is trying to address is access to education right throughout the system. And I like the systemic kind of an approach, making sure people have a head start in education with early childhood education, with specific sectors like the Orang Asli, you know, rural schools, rural teachers. So I think in a sense it's got the access dimension right. I mean, it's good to focus on it. Of course, the challenges are in terms of the granularity, how it's implemented. Yeah, so I think that's one challenge that is obvious. It alludes to a number of things. The emphasis on looking at professional development of teachers, that is alluded to in the plan without details being fleshed out. We're also seeing emphasis on preschool education, you know, starting at the age of 5. The emphasis on AI, which is new in terms of curriculum. The emphasis on STEM. The emphasis on multiple languages in primary school. So a number of things, they've touched the right buttons, I would put it that way. Having said that, I think the devil is always in the details in terms of how it's implemented, how it's carried out, how it's operationalized on the ground. So I'm happy that at least there is acknowledgement of important areas that we need to work on. And of course, I'm cautiously optimistic about how the program is going to play out in the next 5 years. Yeah.
So how do you think this might fit into, because we're also expecting a new education blueprint, which is a longer term blueprint. How, as you said, the devil is in the details, but how do you think that, or what do you think the blueprint ought to be, ought to flash these buttons out, do you think?
Well, two broad areas. One is the school system, from kindergarten right through Form 5, SPM. And also there's the higher education sector, which is also referred to. As far as the school level is concerned, I think what we will hope to see now is how teachers are empowered and provided agency to deal with many of the challenges that are, in a sense, new in a changing environment. How do you deal with artificial intelligence? How do you deal with preschool education? So it's a question of teacher preparedness and continuous professional development. I think that is something that we're going to expect right through the school system.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, you mentioned higher education, and the 13th Malaysia Plan also talks about reforms for tertiary education in terms of the ministry's portfolio, kind of the segregation or demarcation of that. Also talked a little bit about piloting autonomy for public universities, and also improving global competitiveness. Can I ask you, Professor Moses, what you think, whether you think those are the right buttons to hit? Do you think these changes are going to be sufficient to address some of the structural issues that we know plague the higher education system?
Well, it's a good first step, I think, to recognize this. I think these were issues that were even highlighted in the previous higher education blueprint. But there remain a lot of issues even from that blueprint till now, where we're at. And the first issue I can think of is governance issues in terms of higher ed. There needs to be clear demarcation between the roles of the Ministry of Higher Education and the emerging autonomous universities. There seems to be a role overlap. And I can understand why this is so, because public universities, for example, are funded by public funds. And therefore, the Ministry of Higher Education often gets to call the shots because they hold the purse strings, And incidentally, this might result in political interference in terms of shaping the course of higher education. So I think that's one issue that has to be ironed out. To reduce the kind of overlaps and to see what autonomy really means, and how that autonomy actually is tied to the national agenda, the national development agenda. I mean, that's one of the things about public universities, especially at the undergrad level, where you're providing human capital development for the population. And it has to be tied very closely to emerging sectors of growth, right, and how it serves the national agenda, while at the same time contributing to scholarship, international scholarship, however that may take us. So it's a question of deciding to strike a balance between these two things.
Right. Yeah. That's really interesting. Can you talk to me more about that? Because when we look at a roadmap for developing Malaysia's human capital, if that is the goal, then what's missing from this broader vision? I'm just wondering whether, like you said, are we aligned with some the shifts that may happen during this time, jobs that may not even exist yet? Are we looking at it as a whole of government approach, or is this solely resting on the shoulders of higher education and universities?
Yeah. Couple of issues there. One, of course, is whether the graduates that come out of the higher ed system fit into the emerging workplace. There's been a recent report by Khazanah, a report that's called Shifting Tides, which shows that many graduates who are coming out of the system are starting with very low salaries. I was looking at the statistics. 66% earn below 2,000. This were 2021 figures. 10% earn over 3,000. So they're underemployed, and very often there isn't a fit between the kind of specializations that they have developed and the kind of work that they're doing. And these things haven't changed in the last decade, haven't changed very much in the last decade. So the system needs to sort of respond so that graduates are future ready. Graduates are ready for the new workplace. And that's changing very fast, you know. So that's one area that needs to be looked at. There are many things that higher ed can do. Exploring internships, for example, looking at different kinds of systems, looking at TVET-related higher ed. TVET very often is a second option, or it's perceived that way, at least in the public's eyes. So the question of how higher education might have a vocational focus for TVET as well, so that there isn't this kind of two-tier system. And that requires different universities with different strengths and different specializations to deal with it on their own terms, you know. I think the big picture from MOHI might provide guiding light, but I think universities with their academics, with their different areas of specializations, all universities don't have to be the same. They have different strengths. You know, I mean, we tend to think in terms of monitoring things so that it's one size fits all. I mean, each university can develop their own strengths, you know, either in applied sciences or the social sciences or whatever issues they're dealing with, based on the staff that they have developed, both the local and international staff. So staff develop expertise in terms of research. And I think that's one thing that can be done. So one is the fit, employability, the fit to the real workplace. The other issue I can see emerging in higher ed is the kind of gulf that's emerging between research universities and teaching universities. And I think research is very often concerned about advancing the frontiers of knowledge. But a lot of the work that's done in research can actually dovetail with more teaching universities. And I think what we can see is more collaborations, not coordinated from the top. I mean, sometimes we might expect a hidden hand to manage it, but I think developing it in terms of, you know, ways in which the research agendas of the universities can actually drive the teaching agenda, so that teaching universities also benefit from the research as consumers, not necessarily as producers, but also as consumers of this research. Yeah.
Very interesting points that you've given us to think about tonight. Prof, thank you so much for sharing some of your insights with us. Educationist Professor Moses Samuel from Taylor's University and University of Malaya, wrapping up this episode of Consider This. I'm Melisa Idris, signing off for the evening. Thank you so much for watching, and good night.